It was a world most people would never see, hidden behind layers of technology, passwords, and anonymous networks. A place where criminals could hide their darkest secrets, and ordinary people could stumble into nightmares without even realizing it. This world was called the dark web, and it was more than just a rumor. For years, law enforcement warned about it, journalists wrote stories about it, and curious internet users whispered about it online. But in 2019, a shocking discovery changed everything. A dark web market where human lives were being sold. No one could believe it at first. People had heard about illegal drugs, fake IDs, and weapons being traded online. But the idea that someone could put a real human being on sale seemed impossible. And yet, investigators discovered it was true. Behind the layers of encrypted websites, hidden servers, and secret forums, a network had been quietly operating for years. They were selling people, children, young women, and even adults, like objects to the highest bidder. The story begins with a tip. A cybersecurity expert noticed unusual activity on certain encrypted forums. Some accounts were posting strange ads, with coded language and pictures that didn't make sense at first. At first, the posts looked like jokes or scams, but when investigators examined the forums more closely, a pattern began to appear. Names, ages, locations, and photos of people were being uploaded, and prices were attached. Some of these were children, barely teenagers. Others were adults who had been kidnapped or lured online. The dark web operators had perfected their secrecy. They used layers of encryption, digital currencies like Bitcoin, and VPNs to hide their locations. Every transaction had instructions on how to send money anonymously. There were instructions on picking up the merchandise, disguised as packages or fake job offers. The forums had rules, warnings, and codes to keep outsiders away. Anyone who didn't understand the system risked being exposed or worse, silenced. For law enforcement, it was a nightmare. They could see the activity, but tracking the criminals was almost impossible. Most of the servers were hosted in foreign countries. Many users masked their identities with multiple VPNs. Even investigators who specialized in cybercrime admitted it was like looking for a single needle in a field of haystacks, except the hay was digital, spread across hundreds of servers, and constantly moving. The case took months to build. FBI, cybercrime units, Homeland Security, and international law enforcement agencies started sharing intelligence. They monitored transactions, followed cryptocurrency trails, and tried to identify patterns in the coded language. Slowly, names of suspects began to appear. Some were operators, the people who ran the dark web market. Others were buyers willing to pay thousands of dollars for the unspeakable. But the market was not just an abstract criminal organization. The investigators realized that real people's lives were at risk. A 15-year-old girl from the Midwest, for example, had been lured with promises of modeling work. A young man from the East Coast disappeared after meeting someone who claimed to be an online recruiter. Every piece of evidence painted a grim picture. These were not fake listings. These were real crimes happening in real life. The investigation revealed something even more shocking. The dark web market had been operating for years without being shut down. Authorities suspected that there were hundreds of victims who were never reported. Some had been rescued by police after tips, but many were still missing. Each listing was a reminder of how powerful anonymity can be, and how dangerous it is when people believe they can act without consequences. The suspense in this story isn't just online. It's in the real world, in the fear and uncertainty of those being hunted. Families of missing people began noticing patterns, strange contacts, or messages from strangers. Some parents received cryptic emails, hinting that their children were being watched. Others found their kids' social media accounts being accessed from unknown IP addresses. As the authorities dug deeper, they discovered a network of intermediaries. People who acted as middlemen for the buyers and sellers. These intermediaries recruited victims, arranged fake documents, and sometimes even delivered the victims in person. Every layer of this network was designed to be untraceable, and yet investigators slowly unraveled it piece by piece. One breakthrough came when a victim managed to escape. She had been lured from a neighboring state with the promise of a job. She realized something was wrong, ran, and contacted authorities. Her testimony gave law enforcement the first clear picture of the inner workings of the dark web market. Investigators learned about passwords, usernames, and coded messages. They finally had a way to enter the system without getting caught. The scale of the market stunned everyone. Photos, messages, and transaction records showed that the network had been active in multiple states, moving victims across the country. Some buyers were wealthy, others desperate. Some thought they could buy humans like objects without facing consequences. But authorities were closing in. The first arrests were made, and suddenly, the entire operation started to collapse. Even as the market was being dismantled, the story continued to unfold. More victims came. After months of tracking the dark web market, the investigators finally had a breakthrough. The escape of one brave victim had given them the key. They needed usernames, passwords, and encrypted chat logs. For the first time, law enforcement could see behind the curtain into the secret network, where people were treated as objects to be bought and sold. It was a dangerous operation. Every move had to be calculated. A single mistake could tip off the criminals, and the victims still at risk could be harmed. Cybercrime units worked around the clock, tracing cryptocurrency payments and following the digital footprints of the operators. They used advanced software to decode messages, map connections, and identify hidden locations. Slowly, the network began to unravel. Meanwhile, the families of victims were desperate. Parents who had spent months or even years wondering about their missing children finally received hope. Every lead, every clue, was a lifeline. Authorities assured them that progress was being made, but they warned that the investigation would be long and dangerous. The dark web operators had been clever. They constantly changed usernames, moved servers, and used multiple layers of encryption. Some lived in the United States, while others were overseas, making international cooperation essential. FBI agents coordinated with Europol and other agencies, sharing information and analyzing evidence together. The case was no longer just a national investigation. It had become a global operation. Then, one night, a major breakthrough occurred. An intermediary who had helped recruit victims for the market was arrested in a sting operation. The man who had assumed he was untouchable was caught when he tried to pick up a victim disguised as a job opportunity. His phone and computer contained thousands of messages, photos, and payment records. Investigators finally had concrete proof of the market's inner workings. The details were shocking. Victims had been lured from schools, online chats, and social media. Some were promised modeling jobs, others were offered money for assistance. When they arrived, they were photographed, documented, and listed on the dark web marketplace. Buyers paid in cryptocurrency, and the intermediaries handled delivery instructions like professional couriers. It was a horrifying, organized operation that had been hidden in plain sight. As arrests continued, more victims were rescued. Some had been trapped for weeks, others for months. Each rescue was a tense moment. Authorities had to act carefully, sometimes waiting for the perfect opportunity to avoid tipping off the criminals. For the victims, these moments were a mix of fear and relief. Some could barely speak when they saw the officers. They had been living in terror, and suddenly, freedom was real. Court documents later revealed the scale of the operation. The market had hundreds of listings, dozens of intermediaries, and multiple buyers from across the country. Each listing included prices, instructions, and sometimes even reviews, a grim echo of e-commerce platforms, but in the most horrifying context imaginable. The idea that such an organized system could exist in secret shocked both law enforcement and the public. During the investigation, authorities also discovered how the criminals recruited new intermediaries. Some were former victims, coerced into helping, while others were friends or acquaintances of the operators. The network relied on trust, fear, and anonymity. It was like a dark ecosystem. Every person had a role, and the whole system was designed to survive outside the reach of the law. Despite the danger, investigators remained relentless. Every arrest, every rescued victim, provided new information. One particularly chilling discovery was a hidden section of the market that only the most trusted members could access. Here, the transactions were larger, the victims younger, and the instructions more detailed. Investigators realized that if they didn't act fast, more lives would be lost. By mid-investigation, dozens of arrests had been made. Operators, intermediaries, and even buyers were facing charges. Courts in multiple states began prosecuting the criminals, and media coverage started to expose the terrifying truth to the public. For the first time, Americans could see that the dark web was not just a place for anonymous activity. It could be deadly. And sometimes, it reached into everyday communities. But the story wasn't just about criminals and arrests. It was about survival. Some victims shared their experiences, recounting the fear, manipulation, and psychological control the operators had used. Investigators realized that saving lives was not enough. The victims needed support, counseling, and protection from possible retaliation. It became clear that this case was not only a law enforcement challenge, but also a human tragedy with lasting effects. Even after major arrests, investigators warned that the market was only partially dismantled. Some operators had escaped, and other marketplaces on the dark web were still active. The criminals had learned lessons, adapting their methods to avoid detection. For law enforcement, this meant vigilance had to continue. The dark web was vast, and even small mistakes could allow criminals to continue their activities. Part 2 ends with both hope and tension. Dozens of lives were saved, and hundreds of criminals were facing justice. But the threat remained. The dark web had shown its power, its cruelty, and its ability to hide in plain sight. Investigators had won battles, but the war against online crime was far from over. The viewers are left with a gripping question. How far can anonymity on the internet go? And how many more people could still be in danger in hidden corners of the web? The investigation had stretched for more than a year. Dozens were arrested, but one name still haunted the task force specter. He was the silent architect behind the dark web market, the man who created the system that sold human lives for cryptocurrency. Nobody had ever seen his face. Nobody knew his real name. But his digital fingerprints were everywhere. For months, the FBI's cyber unit tried to trace him through encrypted chat rooms and hidden servers. He was smart. Every time they got close, he changed domains, moved servers across countries, and erased his digital trail like a ghost. But one mistake changed everything. During a transaction, Spectre's system sent a ping through a compromised VPN server located in Seattle, Washington. That tiny signal, less than a second, exposed a real IP address. For the first time, the investigators had a location. A surveillance team moved fast. They traced the signal to a suburban home, a quiet street, normal neighbors, perfect cover. Inside lived a 35-year-old software engineer named Daniel Ross, a man with no criminal record, no debts, and a clean background. But on his encrypted laptop was the darkest secret of the internet. When agents stormed the house at 3:42 a.m., they found Ross awake, sitting in front of multiple monitors. He didn't resist. He just said one sentence. "You can't shut it down. It's already bigger than me." Inside his computer, investigators discovered everything. The marketplace's core database, the payment ledgers, usernames of buyers, even private chat logs with other operators. The Spectre persona wasn't just Ross. It was a group of 5 people running the operation like a business. Ross was the coder. Others handled marketing, payments, and recruitment. It was the ultimate digital crime syndicate, anonymous, decentralized, and ruthless. As arrests continued across different states, a horrifying truth came to light. Some buyers weren't random strangers. They were professionals, doctors, businessmen, and even a former police officer. The case turned national headlines overnight. The media called it the internet's most evil marketplace. The courtroom was silent the day Ross faced the judge. The evidence was overwhelming. Thousands of victims' files, Bitcoin wallets, and chat messages proving his involvement. He showed no emotion as the prosecutor read the charges. Human trafficking, exploitation, cybercrime, conspiracy, and distribution of illegal materials. The victims' families sat behind him watching, waiting for justice. Some cried quietly. Others stared at the man who had turned their pain into profit. When the verdict came, the courtroom gasped. Life in prison without parole. Ross's final words were chilling. "There will always be another market. You just haven't found it yet." In the months that followed, The FBI launched Operation SilentNet, targeting hundreds of smaller dark web markets inspired by Ross's system. More arrests followed. More lives were saved. But the agents knew the fight wasn't over, because for every site shut down, 2 new ones appeared under different names. The story of dark web market lives for sale become a symbol, a warning about what happens when technology and evil collide. It showed that the internet, for all its progress, still has shadows where monsters hide behind screens. And as one investigator said in an interview, you can delete a website, you can arrest the people, but you can't delete the idea. That's what keeps us awake at night.